What happens when the man you've loved for 10 years, the man you're carrying a child for, gives your dream home away? Not to you, but to his mistress. He hands her the keys to a $10 million mansion, leaving you his pregnant wife with nothing but eviction papers and a broken heart. He thought he had planned the perfect betrayal, securing his new life on the foundations of your shattered dreams. But he made one catastrophic mistake. He never bothered to check who held the real power, and who, in the end, held the one piece of paper that mattered more than any key, the original undeniable ironclad deed to the entire estate. Olivia and Mark Sterling were the couple everyone wanted to be. Their love story was the stuff of modern fairy tales, a decade-long romance that had blossomed from a college library meeting into a formidable partnership. Mark, with his sharp blue eyes and even sharper business acumen, had climbed the corporate ladder at a prestigious New York investment firm, Sterling and Finch. Olivia, a brilliant architect with a quiet strength and an eye for beauty, had put her own promising career on hold to support his meteoric rise, managing their lives and creating a sanctuary of a home for him to return to. Their life was a curated collection of beautiful moments: weekends in the Hamptons, skiing trips to Aspen charity galas, where they moved as one, a portrait of effortless grace and success. To the outside world, they were golden. After 10 years of marriage, they were finally embarking on their most anticipated project, a family. Olivia was 5 months pregnant with their first child, a boy, and the news had seemed to catapult their happiness into a new stratosphere. To celebrate, Mark had made the grandest of gestures. He purchased a breathtaking Georgian-style mansion in Westchester County, a sprawling estate with limestone facades, manicured gardens, and a history as rich as its new owners. "It's our forever home, Liv," Mark had whispered, his arms wrapped around her as they stood on the grand terrace overlooking a sea of green. "A place for our son to grow up, to run on the lawns, to build a legacy." Olivia had cried, her heart swelling with a love so profound it felt tangible. The house named the Oakhaven was more than brick and mortar. It was the physical manifestation of all their shared dreams. She spent weeks with blueprints and designers, pouring her soul into every detail. She envisioned the nursery with its hand-painted mural of whimsical animals, the library where their son would learn to read, the grand dining room filled with laughter during future holiday feasts. Yet in the midst of this idyllic planning, a subtle chill began to creep into their perfect world. It started small, almost unnoticeable. Mark began working later, his arrivals home pushed from dusk to deep night. The unavoidable client dinners became more frequent. When he was home, he was distant. His phone, a permanent extension of his hand, its screen angled away from her. The easy laughter that once filled their apartment was replaced by a tense silence, punctuated only by the tap-tap-tapping of his fingers on a screen. "Everything okay at work, honey?" Olivia asked one evening, rubbing her swollen belly as Mark stared blankly at a financial news channel. He flinched as if startled from a deep trance. "What? Oh yeah, fine. Just a big merger. The Viridian project, it's consuming." She tried to connect, to bridge the growing chasm between them. "Tell me about it. I want to understand." "It's complicated, Liv. You don't need to worry your pretty head about it." He said the words meant to be reassuring, but landing with a dismissive thud. He stood up and kissed the top of her head, a gesture that felt more like a habit than an act of affection. "You just focus on nesting. Focus on our boy. I've got everything else handled." Olivia tried to believe him. She blamed her unease on pregnancy hormones, on the anxieties of impending motherhood. Mark was a good man. He was her man. He was building this incredible future for them. The Oakhaven was proof of his love and commitment. It stood on a hill just outside the city, a grand white promise of their future. She clung to that image, using it as a shield against the creeping tendrils of doubt. She told herself that once they moved in, once the baby arrived, the warmth would return, and this strange, cold chapter would be nothing but a forgotten memory. She had no idea that the house wasn't a promise but a stage, and the final act of their marriage was about to be a tragedy she could never have imagined. Doubt once planted is a stubborn weed. It grew in the quiet moments, in the space between Mark's clipped responses and his vacant stares. Olivia found herself becoming a reluctant detective in her own home, searching for clues to a crime she couldn't yet name. The first tangible piece of evidence was a credit card statement. Olivia still managed their household finances, a role Mark had gladly ceded to her years ago. Tucked between charges for bespoke baby furniture and organic groceries was a name she didn't recognize: Isabella Rossi. The charges were astronomical. A $5,000 charge at Cartier, a series of lavish dinners at Daniel, a restaurant they had once saved for their own special anniversaries, and a recurring monthly charge for $2,000, labeled simply as Apartment Lease, Greenwich Village. Her blood ran cold. They didn't know an Isabella Rossi. They didn't have an apartment in Greenwich Village. She confronted him that night, her voice trembling as she held the paper. Mark, who is Isabella Rossi. Mark's practiced calm was chilling. He barely glanced up from his tablet. She's a consultant on the Viridian project, a rainmaker. The firm is covering her expenses to keep her happy. It's standard corporate schmoozing live. You know how it is. And the apartment. A corporate rental, for when she's in town from the London office. He said, his explanation smooth and immediate. Too smooth. It's all above board. Don't worry about it. He finally looked at her, his eyes holding a flicker of something she couldn't decipher. Annoyance, pity. Honestly, live with everything I'm doing to get Oakhaven ready for us. I'd appreciate a little trust. He had weaponized their dream. He used the mansion as a shield, a way to make her feel guilty for her suspicion. And for a little while it worked. She retreated ashamed of her prying, telling herself she was being paranoid. But the weed of doubt had taken root. A week later, her best friend, Chloe, called. Her voice was hesitant. Liv, I don't want to stir up trouble, but I saw Mark yesterday. Okay, Olivia said, her heart starting to pound. He had that dinner with the Japanese investors. Well, Chloe said, drawing out the word. He was at Balthazar, and he wasn't with any Japanese investors. He was with a woman, a tall, stunning brunette in a red dress. They were very close, holding hands across the table. The line went silent as the world tilted on its axis. Did you get a good look at her? Olivia whispered. I'm so sorry, Liv. She looked like she could be a model, and the way he was looking at her. It wasn't a business dinner. The description fit a phantom an idea, until Olivia, in a moment of desperate self-destructive curiosity, typed the name Isabella Rossi and Sterling and Finch into a search engine. There she was, in a staff photo from a recent charity event hosted by the firm, standing right next to Mark. Isabella Rossi wasn't a middle-aged consultant from London. She was young, perhaps in her late 20s, with cascading dark hair, fiery eyes, and a confident smirk. She was breathtakingly beautiful, and her hand was resting possessively on Mark's arm. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place with a sickening click. The late nights, the secret calls, the emotional distance. It wasn't the Viridian project. It was the Isabella project. That night, Olivia didn't sleep. She sat in the dark, the blue glow of her phone illuminating the tears on her face as she scrolled through Isabella's public Instagram profile. It was a highlight reel of a life funded by her husband. Photos of designer bags she recognized from the credit card statement. Cocktails at bars. Mark had claimed he was visiting with clients. A photo of her wrist adorned with a new Cartier love bracelet captioned, "Some people just know how to make a girl feel special." Blessed. The post was from the day after the charge appeared on their statement. The most damning post was a picture of her standing in front of a grand white Georgian-style mansion. The angle was artfully chosen, but Olivia knew every column, every window, every perfectly pruned bush. It was Oakhaven. Her Oakhaven. Isabella's caption read, "Site visit for my future palace." Dreams really do come true when you have the right thing by your side. The air left Olivia's lungs in a pained gasp. This wasn't just an affair. It was an invasion. This woman wasn't just in her husband's bed. She was in her home, in her future, in the nursery meant for her son. The betrayal wasn't a crack in the foundation of their marriage. It was a demolition. Mark wasn't just cheating on her. He was actively replacing her, and he was using their shared dream as the centerpiece of his new life. The quiet resolve that had defined Olivia for so long began to harden into something she didn't recognize, a cold, focused fury. Armed with the terrible certainty of the truth, Olivia decided the confrontation couldn't happen within the walls of their shared apartment. That space was already tainted a museum of their dying marriage. She needed neutral ground, a place where Mark's carefully constructed facade would be the hardest to maintain. The annual Sterling and Finch Benefit Gala was in 2 days. It was the firm's most important social event, a night where Mark paraded her around as his perfect wife, a testament to his stable, successful life. It was the perfect stage. She spent the next 48 hours in a haze of controlled anguish. She went to her final dress fitting for the gala, the soft silk of the emerald gown, feeling like a costume. The seamstress cooed about how beautifully it draped over her baby bump. Olivia smiled, a hollow gesture that didn't reach her eyes. She felt like a Trojan horse, smuggling a devastating truth into the heart of her husband's kingdom. The night of the gala, the air crackled with false pleasantries and the clinking of champagne flutes. Mark was in his element, a king holding court. He beamed, placing a proprietary hand on Olivia's belly for the photographers. "My beautiful wife," he'd say to his colleagues, "giving me the greatest gift of all." The hypocrisy was so profound, it was almost surreal. Olivia played her part, smiling graciously, her mind a whirlwind of strategy. She spotted Isabella across the grand ballroom. She was a vision in crimson, laughing with a group of junior analysts, occasionally stealing glances at Mark. She radiated a smug triumph, the confidence of a woman who believes she has already won. Olivia waited until Mark was deep in conversation with Mr. Finch, the firm's senior partner. She excused herself, her heart a drum against her ribs, and made a direct line for Isabella. "Isabella Rossi." Olivia said, her voice even and calm, cutting through the other woman's laughter. Isabella turned, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second, as she took in the sight of the very pregnant wife of her lover. She recovered quickly, her expression shifting to one of polite confusion. "Yes, I'm sorry. Have we met?" "Not formally." Olivia replied, letting the silence hang for a moment. I'm Olivia Sterling, Mark's wife. The junior analysts around them suddenly found reasons to be elsewhere. Isabella's chin lifted defiantly. Of course. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Mark speaks so highly of you. The audacity of the statement nearly stole Olivia's breath. Does he... And what else does he do with you, Isabella? Does he take you to Daniel and buy you Cartier bracelets with my husband's money? Does he sign the lease on your Greenwich apartment from our joint account? Isabella's face paled, the color draining from beneath her perfect makeup. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I think you do, Olivia said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying the weight of steel. I also think you know your way around the Oakhaven estate in Westchester. You called it your future palace, I believe. Let me be perfectly clear. You are a footnote in my husband's life, a dalliance. That house, that life you've imagined for yourself is a fantasy. Stay away from my husband, and stay away from my home. Before Isabella could retort, Mark was there, his face a mask of fury. He grabbed Olivia's arm, his grip surprisingly tight. Olivia, what the hell are you doing? You're making a scene. Am I? Olivia said, looking from his furious face to Isabella's shaken one. I was just introducing myself to your consultant. Isabella is a valued colleague, Mark seethed, pulling Olivia away towards a secluded alcove. You're embarrassing me. You're embarrassing yourself. Once they were out of earshot, his facade crumbled completely. You have no idea the damage you've just done. The Viridian project is delicate. My career is on the line. Your career? Olivia laughed, a bitter, broken sound. You're destroying our marriage. You're flaunting your affair. You're spending our money on this girl, and you're worried about your career. You're being hysterical. He spat the classic gaslighter's defense. It's the pregnancy hormones. You're not thinking clearly. This isn't what it looks like. Then what does it look like, Mark? She cried, tears finally breaking free. What does it look like when my husband is buying another woman jewelry and taking her to the house he bought for our son? He didn't have an answer. He just stared at her, his expression cold and hard. The man she loved, the man whose child she was carrying, was gone. In his place was a stranger, a liar, who looked at her, not with love, but with cold, hard calculation. We will discuss this at home, he said, his voice a low threat. Now go fix your makeup and go back out there and smile. Do not ruin this night for me. In that moment, Olivia understood the full depth of his narcissism. Her pain was an inconvenience. Their marriage was a prop. She was just a part of the scenery. But as she watched him walk away to smooth things over with Isabella, a new feeling began to eclipse the pain, a chilling, crystalline clarity. He thought she was hysterical. He thought she was weak. He had no idea who he was dealing with. The gala wasn't the end of the confrontation. It was merely the beginning. The drive home from the gala was a silent, frigid affair. Mark didn't speak. His jaw clenched, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Olivia stared out the window, the glittering lights of the city blurring into streaks of cold fire. The confrontation had changed nothing. It had only forced Mark's deception further into the open. When they got back to their apartment, the charade of civility was dropped. How could you? He began, not with an apology, but with an accusation. To do that in public, in front of my boss, my colleagues, you have no idea what you've done. I know exactly what I've done, Olivia said, her voice devoid of the tears he expected. I exposed a liar. The only question is, what are you going to do about it? What he did was something she never could have anticipated. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He didn't deny it further. He doubled down. Over the next week, he executed a plan of such calculated cruelty, it was sociopathic. He started by claiming they were in financial trouble. "The Viridian project fell through Liv," he said one evening, his face a perfect mask of feigned devastation. "The market's turning. I was over-leveraged. We're going to lose everything." He produced fabricated documents, official-looking letters from the bank detailing foreclosure proceedings. He spoke of bankruptcy, of having to sell their apartment, their cars. It was a masterful performance. "What about Oakhaven?" Olivia asked, her heart a leaden weight in her chest, though she knew the answer. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair, in a gesture of pure theatrical despair. "It's the first to go. The bank is seizing it. There was a clause in the financing. I'm so sorry, Liv. I tried to build a kingdom for us, and I failed." He was trying to break her, to dismantle her world so thoroughly that she would be too weak to fight, too grateful for whatever scraps he threw her way. He painted himself as a tragic hero, a man who had aimed for the sun and gotten burned, all for the sake of his family. Then came the final brutal blow. A few days later, a courier delivered a thick envelope to their door. Inside were official-looking legal documents. It was a quit-claim deed transferring ownership of the Oakhaven property. But the new owner wasn't a bank or a corporation. The name typed in bold letters was Isabella Rossi. Accompanying it was a letter supposedly from Mark's lawyer, explaining that in a last-ditch effort to settle a significant debt and avoid total financial ruin, the property had been signed over. It was all a lie, a smoke screen, to legitimize the transfer of their dream home to his mistress. He presented it to Olivia as a tragedy. She was a major investor in the project. He lied, his eyes oozing false sincerity. Her father is a powerful man. It was either give her the house or face criminal charges for fraud. I did it to protect us, Liv. To protect you and the baby. He was gifting a $10 million mansion to his mistress and telling his pregnant wife it was a noble sacrifice. While Olivia was reeling from the sheer audacity of his lies, Isabella was celebrating. Her Instagram became a shrine to her victory. She posted a photo of herself, champagne flute in hand, standing on the grand staircase of Oakhaven. The caption read, "Home sweet home. Time to redecorate and clear out the old energy. #new beginnings #. Queen of the castle. She posted stories of designers walking through the rooms discussing tearing down walls and replacing fixtures that Olivia had painstakingly chosen. She was erasing Olivia painting over her existence with gaudy new money taste. Mark moved out a week later under the guise of giving her space. But Olivia knew he was moving in with Isabella at Oakhaven. He left his pregnant wife in a rented apartment he claimed they could barely afford, while he and his mistress played house in the mansion he had stolen. He thought he had won. He thought Olivia was broken, isolated, and powerless. He saw her as a casualty of his ambition, a sentimental relic of a life he was eager to shed. He had taken her home, her future, and her dignity. He believed he had left her with absolutely nothing. But Mark, in his all-consuming arrogance, had forgotten one crucial detail. He had forgotten about Olivia's father, Richard Davenport, a retired corporate lawyer with a mind like a steel trap, and a deep-seated distrust for his son-in-law. And he had forgotten about the one true document that Richard had insisted upon signing from the very beginning. For 3 days, Olivia did nothing. She existed in a grey fog of shock and grief, the cruelty of Mark's betrayal, a physical weight pressing down on her. The world he had built for her was a lie, and the future she had envisioned had been stolen and handed to another woman. She ate only when her baby's kicks reminded her she was responsible for another life. It was that flutter, that tiny, insistent pulse of life within her, that finally pierced through the despair. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about her son. She would not let him be born into a world where his father's treachery had won. On the fourth day, she picked up the phone and called the one person she knew would see through Mark's web of lies, her father. Richard Davenport arrived at her small rented apartment within the hour. A tall, formidable man with kind eyes and a will of iron, he had been a titan in the world of mergers and acquisitions for 40 years. He had retired, but his legal mind was as sharp as ever. He had never fully trusted Mark, sensing a hollowness beneath the charm, a brittle ambition that overshadowed everything else. He listened patiently as Olivia, her voice cracking but resolute, laid out the entire sordid story. She showed him the credit card statements, the pictures from Isabella's Instagram, and the quitclaim deed Mark had used to transfer Oakhaven. Richard examined the documents, his expression hardening with each page. When she finished, he didn't offer platitudes or empty comforts. He simply said, "The boy is a fool, a greedy, arrogant fool, and he is about to learn a very expensive lesson." He walked over to his briefcase and pulled out a slim, leather-bound portfolio. "Mark thinks he's a master of the game," Richard said, a grim smile touching his lips. "But he's playing checkers, and he doesn't realize I set up a chessboard from the very beginning." He opened the portfolio and laid a document on the table. It was titled The Oakhaven Revocable Living Trust. "When Mark told me he was buying Oakhaven," Richard explained, "I told him I wanted to contribute a significant amount as a gift to you and my future grandchild, $1 million. It was a wedding gift I'd been saving." Olivia looked at him confused. "He never told me that." "Of course he didn't," Richard scoffed. "Because I attached a condition. I told him my contribution was contingent on the property being placed into a specific type of trust. He was so eager to get the money and close the deal, he signed whatever I put in front of him, without, I suspect, letting his own lawyers read the fine print." He slid the document across the table. Olivia read the key clauses, her eyes widening. Her father had structured the trust with masterful precision. Olivia Davenport Sterling was named as the sole beneficiary. More importantly, she was also named the sole trustee. Mark was listed only as a co-grantor, with no power to make any decisions regarding the sale or transfer of the property, without the express notarized consent of the trustee. As the trustee, Richard explained, his voice low and steady, "You and only you hold the ultimate power over that property. You are the legal authority. Mark signing a quitclaim deed to his mistress is like a renter trying to sell the Eiffel Tower. It's a worthless piece of paper. It's a fraudulent conveyance. He committed a crime, Olivia." A slow burning fire ignited in Olivia's chest, incinerating the last remnants of her grief. It was hope, fierce and bright. "So, the house is still mine." "My dear girl," her father said, his hand covering hers. "The house was never not yours. Mark was just a temporary resident with delusions of grandeur. The original notarized and filed deed is in this portfolio, safe and sound. It lists the Oakhaven Trust as the owner, and you as the one in charge of it all." The pieces of a new plan began to click into place in Olivia's mind. Mark and Isabella were living in her house, redecorating her rooms, celebrating their victory on her property. Isabella had planned a lavish housewarming party for the upcoming weekend. The invitations had been ostentatiously shared on social media, a final twist of the knife meant for Olivia to see. It was intended to be the grand coronation of the new Queen of Oakhaven. "They're throwing a party," Olivia said, a dangerous glint in her eye. "A housewarming party. All of Mark's colleagues and clients will be there. Everyone who has seen me as the pitiable, discarded wife." Richard saw the shift in her, the transformation from victim to warrior. The lioness was awake. "What do you have in mind?" he asked. "Mark wanted a scene at the gala. I think I can do better," Olivia said, a real smile finally returning to her face. "I think it's time I formally welcomed everyone to my home." The Oakhaven estate glittered under the August moon, a jewel of limestone and light against the dark Westchester hills. The party was an exercise in calculated opulence, a declaration of arrival. A string quartet played Vivaldi on the terrace, mingling with the sophisticated hum of conversation and the clinking of crystal champagne flutes. Inside the grand hall was a sea of bespoke suits and designer dresses, a veritable ecosystem of New York's financial elite. At the center of this universe stood Mark Sterling and Isabella Rossi. Mark was in his element, radiating the smug satisfaction of a man who believed he had successfully executed the coup of a lifetime. He moved through the crowd with an easy charm, one hand holding a glass of vintage scotch, the other perpetually touching Isabella's back, marking his territory. He accepted congratulations with a practiced humility that barely veiled his immense pride. "A bold investment," he'd say, with a dismissive wave of his hand. "The market was right, and we were fortunate to get in. A true legacy property." Isabella was a vision of triumph. She wore a molten gold backless gown that clung to her like a second skin. She was radiant, laughing a little too loudly, her eyes sweeping across the rooms she now commanded. She had systematically erased every trace of Olivia. The warm, inviting elegance Olivia had planned was gone, replaced by a cold, modernist aesthetic that screamed of new money. Stark white walls were punctuated by enormous abstract paintings that were more about price tag than passion. Gilded panthers stood guard by the fireplace, and the furniture was all sharp angles and gleaming chrome. It was less a home and more a gallery of her victory. "To us," she whispered to Mark during a quiet moment near the French doors, her fingers tracing the lapel of his tuxedo. "We did it. The castle is ours, and the old queen, I hear, she's holed up in some dreary little apartment, probably crying into a pint of ice cream. Pathetic." Mark smirked, pulling her closer for a kiss that was performative and proprietary. She got what she deserved. She couldn't keep up. This is our world now. It was at that exact moment, at the precise zenith of their arrogance, that the world they had built began to fracture. The great oak doors at the front of the hall, which had been closed to signal the party, was in full swing, swung open with a quiet, deliberate weight. A sudden hush fell over the room, starting near the entrance and spreading like a ripple through the crowd. The music from the quartet seemed to falter. All heads turned. Framed in the grand doorway, silhouetted for a moment against the dark night, stood Olivia Sterling. She was not the hysterical, broken woman of their gossip. She was a figure of breathtaking composure. She wore a simple, impeccably tailored navy blue silk gown that fell gracefully over her 5-month pregnancy, a silhouette of quiet strength and impending motherhood. Her hair was swept back, her makeup understated, and her eyes, clear and steady, held no trace of tears, only a chilling, crystalline resolve. Beside her stood her father, Richard Davenport, his posture radiating an authority that no amount of money could buy. He was not just a guest. He was a presence, They stepped inside, and the doors swung shut behind them, with a soft, definitive click sealing everyone inside with the impending confrontation. Mark's face went through a rapid series of micro-expressions, utter disbelief, then a flash of pure panic, followed by a hardening mask of rage. Isabella froze her champagne flute, held halfway to her lips, her perfect smile cracking like cheap plaster. "Olivia," Mark hissed quickly, crossing the marble floor to intercept her before she could move further into the room. His voice was a low, urgent whisper meant to intimidate. "What in God's name are you doing here? This is a private event. You need to leave. Now." Olivia met his furious gaze without flinching. Her voice when she spoke was not a whisper. It was calm, clear, and carried easily through the tomb-like silence of the hall. "That's interesting, Mark. I wasn't aware I needed an invitation to enter my own home." A collective audible gasp went through the crowd. People shifted uncomfortably. This was no longer a party. It was a reckoning. "Your home." Isabella had found her footing, striding forward to stand beside Mark, a united front of usurpers. Her voice was sharp, laced with condescending pity. "Oh, you poor thing. You must be confused. The stress of your condition must be getting to you. Mark gave me this house. It's a gift. It's mine." "A gift," Olivia repeated, a faint, mirthless smile touching her lips. She let her eyes drift from Isabella's defiant face and scan the room, meeting the gazes of several of Mark's senior partners and their wives' people she had known for years. "I'm sure you've all heard some version of that story tonight. Mark is exceptionally good at telling stories. He told me a story about how our family was facing financial ruin. He told me a story about how this house had to be signed over to settle a massive corporate debt to protect his family. He's a wonderful storyteller." She took a deliberate step forward, her presence commanding the full attention of everyone present. The problem with stories, however, is that they aren't facts. They are fiction. And tonight, I'm afraid, the fiction ends. "That's enough, Olivia." Mark's voice was louder now, a desperate attempt to regain control. "You're embarrassing yourself." "Security," he called out, looking wildly for the event staff he'd hired. "Don't bother." Richard Davenport said, his voice the calm, booming baritone of a seasoned courtroom lawyer. It cut through Mark's panic like a surgeon's scalpel. "They won't be necessary. We are not here to cause a scene. We are here to present a legal and binding fact." From the slim leather portfolio he carried, Richard produced a single official-looking document with a blue ribbon at the bottom. He didn't hand it to Mark or Isabella. He held it up for the room to see. "This," he announced, his tone leaving no room for argument, "is the originally filed, notarized, and legally unimpeachable deed of ownership for the Oakhaven estate. It is owned by a legal entity known as the Oakhaven Revocable Living Trust." He then passed the document to his daughter. Olivia took it, her hand steady. She held it not like a weapon, but like a simple, undeniable truth. "And this," Olivia continued, her voice resonating with a power no one in the room had ever heard from her before, "is the governing trust document. It names me Olivia Davenport Sterling as the sole trustee and the sole beneficiary of that trust. For those of you who aren't familiar with trust law," she said, looking directly at Isabella, "that means I and I alone hold the exclusive legal authority to control, manage, or transfer this property. It means, quite simply, that this house belongs to me." The room erupted in a storm of whispers. The pieces clicked into place for the financially astute crowd. They understood trusts. They understood legal structures. and they understood they were witnessing a fraud being exposed in real time. "The quitclaim deed Mark signed over to you, Isabella," Olivia said, her voice dropping, becoming almost gentle. "Which was somehow more devastating, is a fraudulent document. It is legally worthless. It's a prop from one of my husband's stories. You are not the queen of this castle. You are merely a guest, and I'm afraid your welcome has expired." "This is a lie, a trick," Mark sputtered, his face slick with sweat. He looked desperately at his boss, Mr. Finch, who was watching the scene unfold with an expression of icy contempt. "She's a scorned woman, trying to ruin me." "A lie." Richard Davenport stepped forward again. "Mr. Sterling, conveyance fraud is a Class D felony in the state of New York. I took the liberty this afternoon of couriering copies of all these documents, including the fraudulent deed bearing your signature, to the Westchester County District Attorney's Office. They found it a most compelling narrative. I believe their investigation will begin tomorrow morning." The mention of the district attorney of a felony was the final fatal blow. Mark Sterling visibly deflated the last of his blustering rage, vanishing, replaced by the stark primal fear of a man who sees a prison cell in his future. Isabella looked as if she'd been struck by lightning, her face a mask of utter horror as she realized she wasn't just losing a mansion, she was implicated in a serious crime. Olivia let the silence hang for a final heavy moment before delivering her verdict. "This party is over," she announced, her gaze sweeping across the stunned guests. "I ask you all to please leave my home now. As for you, Miss Rossi, I am giving you 24 hours to have your personal effects removed from these premises. The locks will be changed at 8:00 a.m. tomorrow. If you attempt to enter this property after that time, you will be arrested for trespassing." Finally, she turned to the man she had loved for a decade. She looked at Mark, at his ruined face and shattered ego, and she felt not hatred, but a profound and weary pity. He was a small man who had made a catastrophic miscalculation. "Mark," she said, and her voice was quiet, now meant only for him. "My lawyer will be in touch with yours. Goodbye." And with that, Olivia Davenport Sterling, holding the deed to her house and the key to her new life, turned her back on the wreckage. She and her father walked calmly out of the grand hall, leaving behind a deafening silence, 2 social lepers, and 100 powerful witnesses to the moment a king and his counterfeit queen were dethroned in the very castle they had stolen. The silence that followed Olivia's departure from Oakhaven was more damning than any shouting match could ever have been. It was a vacuum sucking the air out of the room, leaving behind only the wreckage of Mark and Isabella's grand illusion. The jazz band had trailed off, mid-song. The caterers froze with trays of untouched hors d'oeuvres, and the guests, 100 pairs of eyes wide with scandal, began a quiet, hurried exodus. They scurried away not just from the scene of a social disaster, but from the toxic fallout of Mark Sterling's implosion, eager to distance themselves from a man who had so spectacularly self-destructed. Within 20 minutes, the grand hall was empty, save for the 2 architects of its ruin. Mark stood frozen, his face the color of ash, the triumphant host reduced to a pillar of impotent fury. Isabella had collapsed onto a gaudy velvet and gold sofa she'd had delivered just last week, her glittering dress now looking like a cheap costume amidst the debris of her shattered fantasy. The half-empty champagne flutes, the discarded napkins, the wilting floral arrangements, they were no longer symbols of a grand debut, but artifacts from a sunken ship. "Do something," Isabella shrieked, her voice raw and stripped of its earlier seductive purr. She scrambled up, pointing a trembling, red-nailed finger at him. "You told me this house was mine. You promised me. You said she was a weak, emotional wreck who would just roll over." Mark finally snapped out of his trance, his shock curdling into a venomous rage directed at the most convenient target. "Shut up, Isabella. Just shut up. You and your idiotic social media posts, queen of the castle, did you think she wouldn't see that? You pushed her. You paraded this entire thing in her face, and you forced her hand. I forced her hand." She scoffed, a hysterical laugh bubbling in her throat. "You're the one who lied. You told me it was all handled, that the transfer was ironclad. You're the brilliant investment banker, the master of the universe. Turns out you're just a stupid, arrogant man who couldn't even be bothered to read the fine print on his own $10 million house. Their bond forged not in love, but in a shared, selfish conspiracy dissolved in the harsh light of failure. The insults became more vicious, the accusations more desperate. They were two rats trapped in a sinking core, turning on each other, now that the water was rising. Meanwhile, miles away, in a quiet suite at the Carlisle Hotel that her father had booked, Olivia was methodically taking off her jewelry. She felt a profound and surreal sense of calm. The storm had passed, and she was left standing in its quiet, clear eye. Her father sat in an armchair, sipping a brandy, watching her with a gentle pride. "You were magnificent," Richard said, his voice soft. "You were not vengeful. You were factual. There's a difference. You simply reclaimed what was yours." "I feel empty," Olivia confessed, sinking onto the edge of the bed. "Not sad, not even angry anymore, just empty, as if I've been playing a role for 10 years and I just walked off the stage." "That's because you have," her father replied wisely. "And now you get to write your own script. The stage is all yours." As she sat there, a tiny, insistent flutter in her belly reminded her that she wasn't alone on that stage. Her son was with her. She placed a hand over her bump, and for the first time in months, a genuine, unforced smile touched her lips. The emptiness was already beginning to fill not with the past, but with the promise of a future she would build on her own terms. The consequences of that night cascaded through the following week with the speed and finality of a guillotine. On Monday morning, Mark Sterling walked into the glass-walled offices of Sterling and Finch, determined to perform the greatest act of damage control of his life. He had concocted a story of a vindictive, mentally unstable ex-wife and a complicated legal misunderstanding. He strode towards his corner office, but was intercepted by Mistress, Finch's personal assistant, a woman who had always greeted him with a deferential smile, and now looked at him as if he were something she'd scraped off her shoe. "Mr. Finch will see you in the main boardroom. Now." The walk to the boardroom was a gauntlet of averted eyes and sudden hushed whispers. The entire firm already knew. Jonathan Finch, a man in his late 60s, with a reputation carved from granite, was not alone. The firm's general counsel and head of human resources were with him. There was no friendly greeting. "Mark," Finch began, his voice devoid of any warmth, "I have received upwards of 30 calls since 9 o'clock Saturday night. From clients, from board members, from journalists. They all witnessed the same thing, one of my senior executives attempting to defraud his wife and pass off a stolen asset as his own." "Jonathan, it's a gross misunderstanding," Mark stammered, his prepared speech turning to ash in his mouth. "It's a messy divorce. She's—" "Save it," Finch cut in, holding up a hand. "I don't care about your marital troubles. I care about the integrity of this firm. You used your position and status, a status this firm afforded you, to perpetrate a fraud. You entertained our most valuable clients in a home you had acquired under false pretenses. You have made Sterling and Finch a laughingstock. And worse, you have exposed us to reputational risk of a catastrophic nature. Your actions have demonstrated a shocking lack of judgment and a moral character that is incompatible with the principles of this company. It was a corporate execution. Mark was fired effective immediately. His unvested stock options were voided. His bonus cancelled. The General Counsel slid a termination agreement across the vast mahogany table, informing him that given the circumstances of his departure, the firm would not be contesting his unemployment claim, a pathetic final insult. Security guards who had been waiting discreetly outside then escorted him to his office to pack his personal effects into a single, humiliating cardboard box before leading him out the service elevator. As the doors closed, he caught a glimpse of Isabella Rossi at her desk, staring at her computer, pointedly ignoring his final pathetic exit from the world he had sacrificed everything for. Isabella's own downfall was quieter, but no less complete. She was a pariah. Colleagues spoke to her only when necessary, their conversations clipped and formal. The junior analysts who once fawned over her now barely met her gaze. She was no longer the glamorous, powerful consultant. She was the other woman in a scandal, a failed gold digger. She tried calling Mark, but his number was disconnected. She emailed him, but the messages bounced back. Within a week, she submitted her resignation, unable to endure the silent, suffocating judgment. Her grand New York adventure was over. She packed her designer clothes and the now worthless Cartier bracelet into suitcases and booked a one-way flight back home, her ambition and reputation in tatters. The divorce proceedings were Mark's final desperate battle. Humiliated and furious, he hired a notoriously aggressive lawyer and tried to fight back. He countersued ridiculously, claiming emotional distress and demanding half of all marital assets, including a 50% stake in the Oakhaven Trust. He attempted to paint Olivia as a cold, calculating woman, manipulated by her wealthy father to ruin him. It was a pathetic spectacle. In the deposition, Olivia sat with a quiet, unshakable composure. She answered every question truthfully and simply, her pregnancy a silent testament to the future Mark had tried to destroy. When Mark's lawyer tried to corner her, insinuating she had planned the public humiliation, her father's attorney calmly intervened. "Are you suggesting," he said, in a voice as smooth as polished stone, "that my client should have quietly accepted your client's infidelity, his gaslighting, his theft of a multi-million-dollar asset, and the fraudulent conveyance of said asset to his mistress? Because if so, we can certainly have your client testify to that under oath." The judge, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 50s, reviewed the evidence, the fraudulent quitclaim deed, the financial statements detailing Mark's lavish spending on Isabella, the iron-clad trust document her father had so wisely established. The ruling was devastating for Mark. The Oakhaven Trust was declared Olivia's sole and separate property, untouchable. His claims were dismissed as frivolous and vindictive. Due to his egregious marital misconduct and attempts at financial fraud, the judge awarded Olivia the majority of their liquid assets. Mark Sterling, the man who had dreamed of being a king, walked away with little more than a mountain of personal debt and a tarnished name that would follow him for the rest of his life. With the legal battles behind her, Olivia's final task was to let go of Oakhaven. The mansion was a chapter she needed to close. Before the real estate agent staged it, she went back one last time. The house was empty now, scrubbed clean of Isabella's garish decor and Mark's lingering betrayal. Sunlight streamed through the large paned windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. She walked through the cavernous rooms, her footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. She stood in the space she had designed as a nursery, picturing the mural of whimsical animals she had wanted to paint. There was a pang of sadness not for Mark, but for the dream itself, for the innocent belief she'd once had in their shared future. But it was a gentle sadness, like a faded photograph, not a sharp, open wound. This house was a beautiful shell, but its spirit had been corrupted. It wasn't her home anymore. As she was leaving, she met the couple who were finalizing the purchase. They were a warm, vibrant family, with 2 young children who were already chasing each other across the vast lawn. The wife, a woman about Olivia's age, beamed at her. "It's just breathtaking," she said, her eyes shining with hope. "We can't wait to fill it with noise and chaos and life." Olivia smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. "It was made for that," she said. And in that moment, she knew she had made the right choice. She wasn't abandoning a dream. She was passing it on to someone who could live it. She found her own dream in a sun-drenched 4-story brownstone in Brooklyn's Park Slope. It had a small private garden, high ceilings, and original plaster moldings. It wasn't a palace, but it had character and warmth. It was a home. She poured her heart and her own architectural talent into renovating it, not as a showpiece, but as a sanctuary. She designed the nursery herself, painting a soft, beautiful mural of a forest under a starry sky on the main wall. She reconnected with old colleagues, took on small freelance design projects, and slowly, piece by piece, began to rebuild her professional identity, this time on her own terms. 3 months later, Olivia gave birth to a beautiful, healthy boy with a tuft of dark hair and his mother's calm, observant eyes. She named him Ethan Richard Davenport. As she held him in the quiet of her sunlit living room, the noise of the city a distant hum, she felt a sense of peace that was deeper and more profound than any happiness she had known with Mark. This was her life, a life built not on a gilded illusion, but on a foundation of her own strength. She had faced the ultimate betrayal and had not only survived, but thrived. She had lost a husband who saw her as an accessory, but she had found herself a formidable woman, a loving mother, and the sole undisputed architect of her own magnificent life. Looking down at her sleeping son, she knew that the greatest legacy she would ever build wouldn't be made of brick and mortar, but of the resilience, courage, and unconditional love that now filled every corner of their home. Olivia's story is a powerful reminder that the ultimate power doesn't lie in wealth or status, but in truth, resilience, and the quiet strength it takes to reclaim your own narrative. She was pushed to the absolute brink, betrayed by the person she trusted most, but she refused to be a victim. She used her intelligence, her resources, and her courage, not for revenge, but for justice, securing a safe and prosperous future for her and her child. This story isn't just about a cheating husband and a stolen mansion. It's about the incredible power that can be unlocked when a person decides they will no longer allow someone else to write their story for them. What did you think of Olivia's incredible comeback? Was her move at the party the perfect way to expose them all? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you were moved by this story of strength and survival, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear a story of empowerment, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas and incredible stories. Click that notification bell so you never miss an update.